Well, our country is blessed with water. 1/5 of the world's fresh water supplies are here in the United States. Yet, as we've seen in our series of reports on Oklahoma water resources, as populations increase and industry grows, the demand for water also continues to increase, which often pits the haves against the have-nots. As our Brian Bindley reports, the value of proper water planning will only grow in the coming years.
For metropolitan areas like Oklahoma City, commerce is important, transportation is important, and entertainment is important. But nothing is as important as water.
If we don't have an adequate long-range plan for water and the ability to find additional water resources when we need them, our growth and community development could be greatly hindered.
Marcia Slaughter is the director of utilities for the city and says water planning for a major city with a growth rate that fluctuates from 1 to 2.5% takes a lot of foresight.
If you have a long-range plan and you're implementing timely, you can accommodate those swings and make adjustments.
Which entails creating a 50-year water plan and maintaining it every 10 years, something Oklahoma City has done since the early 1900s. The city currently relies on 4 surrounding lakes as their main water supply, each strategically located.
When there's a drought in the western part of the state, we have water from the eastern part of the state. When there's a drought in the eastern part of the state, last year we were able to rely more heavily on our western water supply.
Slaughter also says the water plans take into consideration a 7-year drought as a worst-case scenario. And even though an estimated 37 billion gallons were used last year, thanks to current rains, the city is on pace to use 1 billion gallons less, which is good news to growing communities like Edmond, who look to purchase water from the city.
We add probably 1,800 to 2,000 citizens to the community about every year, so it is growing, and it has for the last 2 decades.
Jerry Smith is the assistant city manager for Edmond and says half of their water comes from underground and the other half comes from the Arcadia Lake. But not all of Edmond is tied into city water. More and more houses are popping up in the rural areas around the city and drilling their own wells.
We're kind of fortunate here with the way the Garber-Wellington groundwater aquifer is built, in that the domestic water wells don't usually affect the water that we pull out of the Garber-Wellington.
That's because city wells go as far down as 670 feet, where domestic water wells only go as deep as 200 feet, leaving rural residents vulnerable during a drought.
We've seen some cases during a hot summer, a dry hot summer, where some of the water wells that homeowners have stopped producing as much water as they like.
A problem many communities surrounding Oklahoma City face. More and more people are moving outside of the city and are putting more pressure on these communities to look elsewhere for water. One such example was a plan to sell water from the Arbuckle-Simpson Aquifer in 2003.
Over 100 springs that come out of the Arbuckle-Simpson Aquifer. If the aquifer starts getting drilled and water taken out commercially and moved out of the aquifer, then we're going to see several of those 100 springs start to dry up. We're going to see this water flow become a trickle.
Resident John Bruno is concerned about the interest cities like Yukon and El Reno have taken in the aquifer that lies under Johnson County. These flowing streams not only provide drinking water, but also bring in big tourist dollars. That is why the Senate passed a moratorium on selling water from the aquifer in 2003. A 5-year study on the watershed will help lawmakers decide if water can be pumped safely without affecting water levels. Brian Vance with the Oklahoma Water Resources Board.
For the first time on a large scale in a large groundwater basin, we're looking at very specific issues in the interrelationship between water quality and water quantity.
And the decision that will be made in 2008 could very well set a precedent on whose thirst will come first.